This pre-trip webinar will be recorded. So if you miss anything or if there's any information you want to refresh, we'll send you a copy of the recording by YouTube in about a day or two after the webinar finishes. But I see a good number of people on our webinar today, so it's time for us to get started. Today's agenda, first of all, I'll talk about your host, but then most importantly, the most important section is what do you need for this trip? What should you bring? What shouldn't you bring? So we'll talk a little bit about that. What's going to happen on your arrival in Madeira. And I'll touch on a few of the highlights of the itinerary. I'm not going to go through all the excursions. By now, you've read all that. You already know what excursions you've booked and all the exciting things that you've got planned. But it is important to me that we answer your questions. So if you have questions at any time during the webinar, if you scroll either the bottom or the top of your screen, you'll see this box, this menu bar, and it says chat or Q&A. And I'm just going to actually double check that our chat settings are. Okay, yeah, there we go. It should be all set up. Everyone. Okay, good. Should be good. So please put any questions that you have into the chat box or the Q&A box. I do want to make sure that questions that are of interest to all of the group are answered at this time. This is the opportunity to do that. If you have questions specific to your own booking arrangements or anything like that, then by all means, drop a note to Paula or to Aura, whoever you've been corresponding with of late, and they will answer any of those questions. So let's dive right in. With regards to your host, we have a bit of a change of plans, a last minute change that's happened. So we are changing hosts, which is not something we usually do this late in the game, but we will let you know in the coming days exactly who the host of this trip is going to be. And it's going to be somebody who is totally amazing and fun and is going to make sure that you get everything that you are after on your visit to Madeira. Luis is asking, is there a library or bookstore here where the best option want to catch a bit of TV in the evening? Good question, Louise. Let me address that when we get to the Q&A section at the end. So thanks for putting the question in. So that's all about that. So let's get into your pre-trip preparation. First of all, let's talk about your documents that you need. Obviously, Madeira, part of the EU, so you don't need anything but a passport. Later on this year, you may have been reading in the media that they are going to require an electronic travel authorization, but that is not in place for the EU at this point. Now, I will say, if you are going to the UK, either on the way to Madeira, to the way to Portugal, or afterwards, you do now need an electronic travel authorization as of tomorrow. It comes into effect, actually. So I did put that in last week's newsletter in case you didn't see it. So if you or anybody that you know is going to the UK, remind them that they do need that, but it is not required yet for the rest of the EU. If you have your passport, you're good to go. If you haven't seen your passport in a while, maybe it's a good time to dig it out, because you certainly don't want to be scrambling for it the day before you leave, wondering where it is. There's not much you can do about it at that point, but if there was a problem now, you could more easily solve it. No other documents are required. I do suggest that you keep a copy of your passport. I typically take a photo of it on my phone, so I have the information page, because once I arrive, I put my passport in the safe and I never take it out again until I leave. So that's the best way to go. As far as other documents, you might want to print out a copy of your e-tickets and also any prescription medications that are crucial. Any other document that is important, I like to carry an extra copy, and maybe even as I say, a photo or a scan on my phone. That way, if for some reason something goes missing, a piece of luggage, like that's never happened before, then you will have a copy at your disposal. So that's all we need to say about passport and documents. Let's get into the packing part of the trip. So first of all, our trips are informal. There is no formal events. You don't need to bring any dresses or suits and ties or any of that kind of stuff. Now, there are some higher end restaurants in Madeira. There's some Michelin star restaurants. Actually, one of them is very close to your hotel. If you like fine dining, if you like to go, if you like to dress up to go to the theater, for example, then of course, by all means, bring something for that. But in the context of what we do on this trip, it's all casual. So casual wear is the way to go. Now, what kind of casual wear? At this time of the year, the beauty of Madeira, of course, it's the island of eternal spring. So the weather is mild all year round. Never gets too hot in summer, never gets very cold in winter. Up in the mountains, it can get chilly. And on some of our tours, like for example, the North Tour, where we go up and over the top or close to the third highest mountain on the island, it can get chilly up there. So when I say chilly, it could even go as low as 7-8 degrees, but you're only up there for sort of half an hour, 45 minutes kind of thing. For the most part, the temperatures are going to range anywhere from sort of the mid-teens, sort of 14, 15 degrees at night, cooler, to in the daytime, typically around 20 degrees. We've had days in Madeira in the past that have gotten up to 23, 24 degrees. So that I wouldn't say that it's summer weather, but it's certainly not winter weather. It's kind of that fall, spring type weather. It will invariably rain at some point during the trip, hopefully not on too many days. Generally speaking, we found that, members have had in the course of 2 weeks or 4 weeks, maybe, a day or two, and it's usually rains for a couple of hours. Being in the middle of the Atlantic, the weather systems tend to move through. That being said, layering is important. In this case, we say that on every trip, layering is important, right? Put some, thin layer on underneath, something you could peel off if it, when the sun comes out, it gets warm. But in this case, I'm talking about waterproof layering. It's a good idea to have a windbreaker. It can get windy, particularly on the coasts, as well as up in the mountains. So a windbreaker would be an important thing to have. And as well as certainly a light sweater or a jacket, maybe something with Gore-Tex or that will insulate you a bit from when it is cooler, either in the evening or, as I say, when you're up in the mountains or when you're walking on the levadas, for example. Now, walking footwear is important. Comfortable footwear. Again, casual. You can leave the fancy loafers at home, and the heels for sure leave at home, because Funchal is all cobblestone streets. So flats are the way to go for our women members. The only other thing to keep in mind is that there is the opportunity to visit the cathedral and some of the other churches and so on the island. That in that case, you should wear appropriate wear as you would to any church. They don't have very specific requirements, but it is important that you are covering your sort of arms and legs, and as you would go to church anywhere. I highly suggest a day pack, and even one that's somewhat waterproof. Again, rain does come and go. Often it'll come in, it'll blow in for 20 minutes, half an hour, and then it'll blow back out again. But it can catch you by surprise, because it's not like looming over the horizon. Typically, it sort of comes from over the mountains, and next thing you know, it'll be raining. So you don't want to be caught by surprise. Have a pouch, particularly to put your phone, your camera, any other electronics or anything else that just cannot get wet. Sun protection at the same time should also not be forgotten. You can, of course, buy it there as well. All the brands and so on is pretty much the same as at home, but just do make sure you have it. Because the sun can be quite strong. And again, when you're out on levada walks or any of our longer outdoor excursions, you'll want to protect yourself from the sun. So footwear, comfortable footwear, and good shoes for walking and hikes. So I know that you're going on a couple of levada walks. And so these levada walks are not mountain climbing, right? So the question might come up, do I need hiking boots? No, you don't need hiking boots. Now, you have a lot of free time on your trip. So if you are somebody that really likes to do avid hiking, you can go all the way up to the highest peak of Madeira. It's a trek I've always wanted to do myself, never managed to get the time. If you want to do something like that, then perhaps sturdier hiking boots would be necessary. But for the walks that we have in the context of this program, just good, comfortable walking shoes will do the trick. Poles, I'm sure, will be a question as well. Should you bring walking poles? Honestly, walking poles are a good idea. for anybody of our age bracket. So I always walk with poles because it's just a healthier thing to do. Not necessary, optional. Only bring them if you've got collapsible, lightweight poles that you can stick in your luggage. Couple other things to remember. Do bring a travel adapter for your electronic appliances. It's the EU adapter, so that's the one with the 2 round prongs. Voltage there is 220 like everywhere else in Europe. Most of your devices will be on dual voltage. So your phone charger, your camera charger, all these kinds of things will be no problem dual voltage, assuming they were made in the last sort of 10, 15 years. If you have any other appliances or devices that you're bringing, in particular, anything with a heating element, whether it's a hair dryer or a straightener, or also sometimes we've heard about hearing aid chargers, sometimes are single voltage, only take 110. If you're not sure, check the label or ask someone in your family or a friend to double check for you, because you don't want to plug a 110 device into a 220 volt socket. You won't like the results. Bring, as I mentioned before, medications, supplements, copies of all your prescriptions. You can get pretty much anything on the island, but dealing in Portuguese to get a Canadian prescription filled is not an easy task. So it's better if you have everything you need with you. If you're somebody that uses a CPAP machine or you need some other device close to your bed, I do suggest as well maybe bringing a short extension cord, only because usually there's plugs that are very adjacent to the bedside tables, but not always. And so if you have something like that, do keep that in mind. Take your mobile phone. You've probably read all about this. We use Telegram for communicating amongst our members. You'll get a broadcast message every evening, which shares information about the following day's excursions and activities, and when we're meeting up for cocktails or happy hour or whatever the case may be. So having your phone is crucial. On this trip, you will get a SIM card from us. This will be a physical SIM card. In fact, actually, let me go to the next slide. I'm jumping ahead. Let's go to communications while I'm on the topic. You will get a SIM card from us that looks like the SIM card here. So this is a physical SIM card. Oops, sorry, I went back. Jumping all over the place here. This is a physical SIM card that goes into your phone. So what will happen is you'll take out your Canadian SIM card, put it in a safe place, and pop in the Portuguese SIM card that will give you mobile data for the entire duration of your stay in Madeira and beyond. If you're staying longer in, I think the validity of the card is 30 days. Once you have this SIM card in, you'll be able to use all of the functions on your phone, just as you would using your SIM card from home, except for text messaging. So that's one thing that's important. I know some people in Canada still use text messaging. That's when you are sending a message to somebody's phone number. So that, of course, will not work because we're taking your Canadian SIM card out. If you're somebody that texts a lot, with people back home, you might say, hey, jump on WhatsApp or Facebook Messenger or Telegram or one of the myriad of other apps that allow you to communicate with folks back home. So that's just one important thing to remember. If you have a brand new phone, so something that was built in the last year or two, like some of the newer iPhones, there is no port for a SIM card. So it takes eSIM only. Unfortunately, we cannot provide eSIMs because it's a whole other can of worms to organize. So if you are in that situation, you do have to obtain your own eSIM card. And there are a million options online. A lot of our members swear by Airolo. And so if you're somebody in that boat, then that's the way to go, is to get a SIM card, an eSIM in advance, and then you'll have connectivity from the moment you hit the ground. So as I mentioned, Telegram, once again, please do download the app before the trip. This is really, really important. Download it, send a message, and make sure that it's working properly, because once you arrive and you switch out the SIM card, you may not be able to get the right authorization to load Telegram onto your phone. So it's important to set it up before you head out on the trip. All of the instructions are in your pre-trip information document. So if you read through that carefully, there's a whole separate page just talking about Telegram and how to set it up. And if you struggle with it at all, honestly, the best thing to do is go to YouTube, Google how to set up Telegram, and you'll find, a dozen instructional videos on how to get it going. It may seem daunting at first if you're not used to it. Our members that have used it love it because it just enables a whole other level of communication while on the trip. All right, let's jump back here for a second to money. Of course, we're in Portugal, which is the euro. The euro at the moment is about $1.50 Canadian for €1. You can use credit cards almost everywhere. So they are as ubiquitous as at home, restaurants, shops, pretty much everywhere. That being said, it's a good idea to have some cash with you. I personally never take foreign currencies out in Canada because we just get terrible exchange rates from our banks, even worse from the exchange offices in the airport. So I generally head to the first ATM machine with my bank card or my credit card, and I withdraw whatever funds that I need. A couple of €100 at the beginning will probably last you for most of the trip. Given that you can, again, use your credit card for all the restaurants and so on and so forth. All that being said, we do suggest the Wise card. This is like the traveler's pro tip, if you will, because the Wise card is a prepaid debit credit card. It actually says Visa right on it, so you can use it just as you would your Visa card. The advantage is that the exchange rates are far, far better than any bank in Canada. And also you can withdraw up to, I think, 350 Canadian dollars without any Wise withdrawal fee. I don't know, my bank in Canada charges me $5 to make a withdrawal using my bank card. The Wise card is free up to $350, and after that, it's fairly nominal. And you can instantly go from one currency to the next. So what I do, I get Wise account, I load up, whatever, $1,000 Canadian. I'm going to Europe. I see the rate's good. I switch it into euros. I've got 500 left over. Then I switch it into pounds. Then I switch it into Tanzanian shillings. You can switch between currencies instantly. It's a great way to go. So we do recommend that. And information on how to get one, if you'd like to, is in, again, that documentation. The only other thing you might need some cash for is gratuities. Now, all of the gratuities that are for all of the included portions on our trip are covered. So your drivers, your guides, your waiters in the restaurants, all of those gratuities are taken care of. You've prepaid them. It's part of the package. So the only gratuities you need is if you're out on your own. If you need, particularly if you're going out for dinner, obviously most of the dinners are on your own, and you want to make a tip. It is appreciated, even if you pay the bill with your credit card. It's always appreciated if the tip is in cash, because then it goes directly to the server. Whereas not always the case that the person looking after you in a restaurant actually gets the tip if you put it on the credit card. I will say something about that as well. If you haven't traveled in Europe, you may not realize this. It's not like at home, they bring you the credit card receipt and they've already run it through, and then you add in the tip amount, and then you total it at the end. When you give them your credit card, the transaction is finalized. So if you want to put a tip on your credit card, you need to tell them in advance. How much to tip in Portugal? It's like most places in Europe, in that generous rounding up to a maximum around 10% is kind of what's customary. But if you don't tip, nobody's going to come chasing after the street. Typically in smaller cafes and so on, people don't tip. Personally, I always like to leave a few cents behind, or a euro or two, just because it's appreciated, and that's just what we do as visitors to a country like this, or to any country, to be honest with you. We also don't provide tipping for housekeeping. That's a personal matter. So if you'd like to do that, that would be for your own account as well. We talked about that already. Let's jump in and talk a little bit about health protocols. Just a couple things I want to mention here. First and foremost, if you feel unwell at any point, if you, particularly if you've got a sneeze or a cough, or you've got anything that is even mildly contagious, we ask for the benefit of all of your other fellow members on the trip. Please, please, please wear a mask. We all hate masks because we wore them for 2 years during the pandemic. But at the same time, we're also cognizant that, we've all sat in that, in that bus or on the airplane next to somebody who's coughing their head off. And how does that make you feel? Not not too well. So we would just assume that our community, at least, that we take responsibility for each other. And if we are feeling a little bit off, particularly coughing or sneezing, please wear a mask and let your host know that you're not feeling too well. The second point is, if you at any point on the trip should injure yourself in any way, even if it's a minor cut or a scrape or a bruise or whatever it happens to be, please let us know. Please let your host know. We will. We really want to make sure that you come back in the same number of pieces that you left in, and so we may even suggest that you see a local clinic or so on. We just want to make sure that everybody returns as healthy as when they left on the trip. The only other thing to say is that our trips, of course, are non-smoking. So if you are a smoker, obviously you can do that at your own time, but we ask that you don't smoke during any of the Wheel and Anchor sanctioned events or excursions. So I think that's all I need to say there. So now fast forward to the beginning of February, you're all ready to go to Madeira. In the 24 hours before your trip leaves, please make sure you pay extra attention to your email. Airlines are generally very good at advising if they anticipate that there's going to be a delay. And there are as many delays as there always have been. It does happen. If you are going to be missing the flight that you're scheduled to arrive in Madeira on, so let's say you're flying from Toronto to Lisbon, and then from Lisbon down to Funchal, and if you miss that connection, it's really important that you send your host a note. And again, I'll let you know who the host is going to be in the next couple of days, that you send your host a note and let them know that you're not on the flight. That way we avoid you having a driver running around the airport trying to find you when you're not actually there. Of course, if you're arriving early, then you will have made your own transfer arrangements. All of that details are on the transfer voucher that you were provided as part of your departure documentation. So yeah, get to the airport early, have an extra drink, telegram your host if you are going to be not on the flight. And we suggest using timeshifter.com to alleviate the symptoms of jet lag. It's a free app. I think there's a paid version as well, but I just use the free one. This enables you to adjust your body clock slightly, particularly if you're coming from the West Coast, which is an 8-hour difference to Portugal. Then it's really a great solution. I know that our host Amber uses it all the time, and she swears by it that she doesn't get jet lag. It's pretty amazing. Do keep note of your luggage weight, particularly if you're flying on separate flights, because I know sometimes some members will fly over and spend a couple of days in Lisbon and then have a domestic flight. Make sure that your luggage your luggage allowance is clear for all your different flights, because often transatlantic is a different weight allowance than what on domestic flights in Europe. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. When you get to Funchal Airport, it's not a super big airport. It's pretty straightforward. After you collect your baggage, you'll come out and you'll find your driver there ready to pick you up and whisk you to the hotel, which will take about 20 minutes, 25 minutes, depending on what time of day that you arrive. So you'll arrive in and you will meet your host when you get to the hotel in the Lido area of Funchal. So let's take a quick look at a map of Madeira. The thing I love most about this island is that you can get everywhere on the island within. Well, I have this thing on my screen. Strange thing on my screen. I know, maybe you can't see it. Everything, you can get to everywhere on the island in about the maximum about an hour and 15, an hour and 20 minutes. So it's a very accessible island. It is, of course, all mountains basically in the middle. And even Funchal and the Lido area, which is down here just to the west of Funchal, everything is basically uphill or downhill. The main road out in front of the hotel is flat, but not for very long, and then it goes up and down. So you're definitely going to get a little bit of exercise when you're in Madeira. From Funchal, we're going to head out on different excursions. They're going to take us, depending on what you've booked, to all points of the island. One place is more beautiful than other. and with your host. One of the things that I would highly recommend, you'll see it if you go on the East Tour, is doing a hike down the easternmost point of the island down here. It is truly spectacular scenery, unless, of course, you have a fear of heights. But that's basically Madeira in a nutshell. I'll talk about a few of the highlights of the trip, a few of the excursions that you're going to be going on. The West Tour, obviously, to the west side of the island. You're going to head up to see Porto Moniz, and which has these incredible sea baths. I do encourage you to try swimming in the ocean. It's cool, but it's not bitterly cold. At this time of the year, it's typically, I went swimming last year in March, it was around 17 degrees. And if it's a nice sunny day, there's nothing more beautiful than swimming in the Atlantic Ocean. You'll also see the sea cliffs of Cabo Girau. That's where this photo is taken from, the highest sea cliffs in Europe. And you'll have a chance to take an exciting cable car ride that goes almost vertically down, not far from this point here. You'll definitely be trying local food, of course, and wine. They produce all kinds of different wines, and not just Madeira wine. Madeira wine is famous. It's a fortified wine. You'll learn all about it when you're there. Definitely worth trying, because it's not something that we generally drink anymore at home, but maybe you'll try it and get a taste for it. But they produce a lot of other table wines as well, so there's an opportunity on that tour. And regardless, order the local wines. You'll be very pleasantly surprised how good they are. On the East Tour, as I mentioned, you'll see this long peninsula that's pictured here. And I also recommend, if you'd like, on one of your free days, you can get out there by public transit, or if you get a few people together, take a taxi and do a hike along that goes just on the other side of this ridge. It is truly spectacular scenery. You're going to go on a couple of levada walks. The levadas, of course, are these irrigation channels. You can see it pictured here, which were built ages and ages ago, like well over a century ago, to bring water from the very wet interior of the island out to the drier coastal areas. And what makes the levadas great is that because it's an irrigation channel, the paths are practically flat. They very gently incline up and down. So this is what Madeira is perhaps most famous for, is the levada walks. There's a couple of different ones. Some of them have quite steep sides to them. You can sort of get a sense from this picture here. And so it's a good idea. Let your host know, or let your guide know, if you are somebody that has a little bit of a fear of heights, just so that they're aware and they can make sure that they negotiate you past any spots where it can be a little bit more precipitous. There's some incredible architectural marvels here, including the main cathedral in Funchal. This trip will give you really some insight into these buildings, and they often have concerts as well. Your host will be on the lookout for some of those activities and encouraging you to get out and check out some of those things. The Wine on the Mountain excursion is one of my favorites. We drive up to the north side of the island to a private vineyard where we'll get to taste some incredible small batch produced wines, as well as big skewers of meat, which are very famous cuisine in Madeira. One of the other favorite excursions is to go up to Monte Palace. This is like a manor house that's high up over the city of Funchal. Funchal is, of course, built onto the hillside. And up here, they have an incredible botanical garden. And this is a spot where you can take the famous toboggans. Now, it's not like a toboggan like on a snow-covered slope. It's driven by two gentlemen who sort of maneuver this thing down the roadside down towards the city center. It's not as terrifying as it sounds. In fact, it's a lot of fun. Everybody gets a lot of enjoyment out of it. So hope you'll join up for that. On the North Tour, you'll see some of the incredible northern coast of the island. This is the less populated part of the island, and there's some beautiful coastal scenery and some lovely villages that you'll get a sense of. So that's a little bit of what's in store for you in Madeira. I'm hoping I've covered most of the key points. I'm just going to look at my notes here to make sure that there isn't anything that I haven't forgotten. But now is a good time to ask any questions. Louise again asked about if there's a library or bookstore nearby. Yes, library nearby. I don't personally know of a library in the immediate area of the hotel. Where you're situated in Funchal is in an area called the Lido. And this is where a lot of hotels and condo buildings are all situated along this stretch of coastline with beautiful views out to the Atlantic Ocean. All the amenities are there: grocery stores, tons of restaurants, cafes. There's a laundry service practically across the street from the hotel. So there's all the amenities are there. I got to imagine that there's a library in there somewhere, but I must admit I didn't go looking for one. If you want watch a bit of TV, there's a TV in your room in the hotel or in the apartment, depending on which one you've booked. So you will have no problem watching some TV. A lot of the TVs now are smart TVs, so you can probably plug in your Netflix. And in case you're somebody that has a subscription to something like that, it's a good idea to take your password with you because that's often an option. Rebecca asked if we get the physical SIM card on the day of arrival. Yes, you should get it on the day of arrival. When you get in, there'll be an orientation. There'll be an icebreaker event. You get a chance to meet your fellow members, and you'll get a bit of an overview about what's in store for the coming days, and also to have a chance to ask questions and so on about what other activities that you could get up to while you're there. So I believe the SIM card will be issued on the day of arrival. At the very latest, it'll be the following morning, but it won't be until you actually get to your hotel. Wi-Fi is everywhere as well, so that's a backup. Good. Are there any other questions? I think I covered weather. I covered what to wear. I covered your documents. I think I covered everything. If you do have any other questions, let's see. Did somebody ask another question? No, I got those ones answered live. Okay, I've got those covered. If you do have any other questions, obviously we want to make sure that we get them answered for you. So please drop Paula a note. If she doesn't know right off the top of her head the answer to the question, then she will certainly revert to one of my colleagues in our operations department, and we'll get the question answered. There is one more question in here. Jean-Pierre asked if there's any chance that some of the canceled excursions might be available. Yes. Well, yes and no. A lot of the excursions that we offer can also be booked publicly. So there are local tour companies that offer the excursions some of the excursions that we offer, and then a whole bunch of other ones as well. Particularly Nevada walks are easily bookable through other agencies, and dolphin watching tours like boat trips and stuff like that. So if there is a particular excursion that we could not operate because we didn't get enough people signed up, mention it to your host, mention it to our local guide, Rubina. She's lovely. You're going to love her. She is an absolute encyclopedia of information, and they'll point you in the right direction to make sure that you can see everything. Believe me, there's for those of you who are staying for 2 weeks, how can I say this? You'll probably wish that you stayed for the whole month. It seems like a small island, but everybody that has traveled with us that's been there for a month has said, I had no idea all of the things that there are to see and do in Madeira. I had such a wonderful time. So you will not be bored unless you choose to be bored, in which case you can do that. You can just hang out by the pool and relax. Alice asks, are you able to change excursions or trade with fellow guests? In general, yes. So if you feel a bit off and you can't or don't want to go on an excursion, obviously the sooner that you know that, the better. But you can put a message. This is why we have Telegram again, because we have a group chat, and you can say, oh, I made other plans, or I don't want to go on the North Tube tomorrow. Does anybody want to take my spot? You are more than welcome to do that. The only thing that we can't guarantee is if you haven't booked an excursion and you want to book in, that's the only thing, because we do have space limitations due to the size of the vehicle as well as the restaurants. We don't operate like typical tour companies going to the same, trough style restaurants where they're feeding busloads of people. We don't do that. We go to generally very small restaurants that don't have the capacity to take larger groups, because that's what we like to do. So. Good deal. Good. I think I've covered everything. So if there's a last chance for any questions, but again, we are here to answer all your questions. And I promise I'll get back to you in the next couple of days to confirm who your host is going to be. And I promise it's going to be somebody a lot of fun. And have a wonderful time. You will love Madeira. Trust me. I absolutely loved this island. I honestly, I've thought about moving there. It's such a wonderful place. Yeah, it's a beautiful part of the world. Take care, everybody. Have a good trip over. Have a wonderful time in Madeira. And we'll see you all again very, very soon. Bye-bye for now.